making that sustainability transformation is necessary for a couple of reasons. First of all, there's the big why. As human beings, we cannot do the green transition and stop climate change unless we get the healthcare sector on board. So we're not talking about smaller particular projects here. We are talking about changing the way the organization functions as a whole. A very good way of testing if your sustainability strategy and your transformation plan is on the right path is to ask these simple questions. Does our sustainability strategy or sustainability transformation help provide better treatment for patients? Do we make more money from it? Or do we save more money from it? And if you cannot answer yes to ideally all of those three, then you're doing something wrong.
Hello and welcome to the Sustainable Healthcare Podcast. In this episode, we're discussing why transformation fails. So a lot of companies out there are running sustainability transformations, and frankly, a lot of them are failing. So we're going into the top reasons why transformation fails. It has to do with mistaking goals for strategies. It has to do with a failure to engage the people of the organization early and often. And it has to do with not integrating the sustainability strategy directly into the growth engines of the company. So if it's not connected to the revenue generation or the profit generation, it's probably going to fail. So I'm interviewing Joachim, who is a co-founder of Green Innovation Group and also has been responsible for a bunch of transformation projects. And it's a really interesting conversation. So I hope that you will listen. I hope that you will learn from it. I hope that you will get some insights that you can bring home into your own organization and learn from and use in your own work. That's our basic intention. So without further ado, I hope that you will enjoy this episode of the Sustainable Healthcare Podcast. Thanks for coming in for this session. We're going to spend this episode talking about why transformations fail. And the reason why that's really important to us is that when we're looking at our theory of change, it is that we can provide advisory and consultancy services to major organizations that want to take part of the green transition. So if we can learn why transformations fail, we can also help more transformations succeed in a green direction. So that's the essence of why this is important to us. But maybe we can start off with you sharing some of the reflections that you have on why transformation fails.
Yes, definitely. Thanks, Frederick. So let's start by looking at what is a transformation in an organizational context and what is a sustainability transformation. So a transformation is a radical change of the business processes, the products and services, even the way of recruiting. Basically, every way a pharma company or a hospital or a subdivision of one of those delivers the services and goods that there. We're talking the whole thing. That doesn't mean that everything has to change and everything has to be new, but it's not okay. Now we're implementing this new software, or we split this department into two.
What would be a good example, just to get some context and sort of get close to the case? What's an example of a transformation that our listeners can relate to?
Yeah. So and then let's talk about what is sustainability transformation in this regard. So sustainability is a full sustainability transformation is to either at the company as a whole or in particular business unit to put in sustainability at its core into the business planning, into the KPIs, into how the service or product is delivered, into how the leadership is trained. That would be a full transformation. Doing a something that's not necessarily transformative, but could be part of a transformation. Let's say we have a medtech device or an API, and we do
an API, what is that?
Active product ingredients. It also means a lot of other things, but in the healthcare context, it means an active product ingredient.
So it's the stuff that makes the medicine work.
Yes, exactly. Thanks. You do get a bit entrenched in this lovely sector we're in. So if we have a medtech device and we remove part of the plastic to either use lesser materials or use a biodegradable material, and that's definitely a sustainability improvement if it's done right, especially if it's removing material. But it's not necessarily transformative. So we're not talking about smaller particular projects here. We are talking about changing the way the organization functions as a whole. And I believe this is necessary for all pharma companies, healthcare systems, and medtech companies. Making that sustainability transformation is necessary for a couple of reasons. First of all, there's the big why. As human beings, we cannot do the green transition and stop climate change unless we get the healthcare sector on board. It emits roughly 4% of all global CO2, twice that of the flight industry. So we cannot do it without the healthcare sector. That's the one thing. Then
someone actually asked us something quite interesting there the other day where I'm afraid I don't remember who asked it. It was a question posted on LinkedIn where we're both quite active, so we have a lot of our conversations there. And someone asked, so the flight industry, that's relatively simple to fix because the emissions are related to the consumption of fuel. But if we're looking at the healthcare sector, we can't just substitute this fossil-based fuel with something, or just, but it's simply, it's a very simple mathematical problem for the flight industry to go green. You have one sort of root cause for the emissions that if you can make the emissions from the fossil fuel go away, then it's basically fixed. But when we're looking at the healthcare industry, and we have this diagram that's splitting all of the emissions associated to the activities of a healthcare system in the UK, we can just see that it's divided on maybe 12 different segments that are then divided into
thousands of thousands
other segments. So it's an incredibly complex task.
That's an interesting question. It's a bit of a sidetrack, but at the core of it, yes, the flight industry, by far the major CO2 emissions are coming from the jet fuel. It's simple, but it ain't easy because you need a very high energy density to get to move. So I would much rather try and fix the healthcare industry than the flight industry, because the flight industry is one of the few places where we are actually limited by technology. For the major part of the green transition across all industries, that is not the case. We have the technology that we need. We don't need to wait for a hockey stick. Flight is the exceptions. So the best thing you can do currently is just to fly less or stop flying.
The not flying flight.
Except that demand is increasing still, hopefully with less business flights. When we are looking at the healthcare industry, it's much more bits and pieces. Of course, there are some key drivers as well, like preventive healthcare, like telemedicine, electrifying vehicle fleets, optimizing cooling and warming across the building mass, these kind of things. But it's much more trench warfare and do this here and do this there versus, in quotation marks, just fixing jet fuel. So if we go back to sustainability transformations in a pharmaceutical company or healthcare system, that needs to happen because we cannot do the green transition without the healthcare sector. But it also needs to happen because you're going to be in a very bad position, both commercially or as a care provider, if you're not doing that.
So we kind of have a bunch of different actors at stake here, right? We have actually us as a society at large. We need to fix the healthcare sector, because if we don't, it's going to be very complex to have a green transition at large, for society at large. But for each individual company, there's actually a different incentive, because it's going to be their license to operate in the future.
Yeah, it's pure business. They're going to need it in terms to win the tenders, to sell their products and services. We're seeing that being written into procurement tenders more and more. They're going to need a sustainability transformation to get the best talent that they can, and they're going to need it to comply with the regulation and as a key framework for cost reductions. Unfortunately, the healthcare industry, if you look at pharma and medtech companies, maybe let's cut out the hospitals for now. They are a lot less mature than in a lot of other industries in terms of transformation. But it's coming, and it's coming fast.
So can you walk us through the main reasons why transformation fails?
The main reasons why transformation fails is, one, they focus on analysis over process. That means that they fail to engage the people inside the organization early and often. The second thing why transformation fails is that they forget it to put it at, or sustainability transformations fail, is that you forget to put it at the core service and make it business critical. It cannot be something that just comes on top. And then the third one is to have poor strategy. If we look into what does this actually mean? Well, the first one with process over analysis is that at the end of the day, even in a large multinational pharmaceutical company, it's made up of human beings. And they're organized in an ecosystem, and they have contracts, and there's software that helps them work together. But at the end of the day, it's human beings, space monkeys, that needs to do something different. We don't, as human beings, like to be told what to do if we haven't engaged as well. So the classic thing is that you hire some consultants, us or other people, and they will do a very fine report that may be a good analysis, maybe a not good analysis, but at the end of the day, it often really doesn't matter, because it just stops at the analysis. And that analysis, the cliche is to say it will end up in the drawer. It will probably not end up in the drawer. There will be a lot of talk about this analysis, and it will be posted on the internet. But if it's developed without the organization and the people and the managers and the experts and all the people who have to go out and live it and make the change on an everyday basis, then it's not going to be adopted. So that's the one thing. But the other thing is that why process over analysis is important, especially in a sustainability context, is that we cannot know everything beforehand. So if you sidestep and try to do an analysis completely from an outside perspective, even if you're doing interviews with the organization and so on, it relies on the premise that we somehow have access to the full board.
Yeah, that we have the knowledge and the data that we need to
we just need to extract it. While there's a lot of methodology that does help, sustainability, business models, and getting it into the operations is still so new, and maybe always will be, that a lot of the solutions come from the work into interaction with the people. So you really cannot separate the two. And the fact is also that if you do good process, even if the analysis is not perfect, and we can get back to later what a good analysis means and what a good strategy means, you will be more likely to succeed, because you're still having people engaged, and you're activating all the implicit knowledge that R&D say. It's there's one of the things that keeps astonishing me in the healthcare industry, especially in pharmaceutical companies, is just how much knowledge there is and how freaking complex it is that no one, not the CEO, not the guy or girl who's worked there for 40 years, knows even remotely everything that's going on inside their own division, let alone the whole company.
So now we've dived a bit into sort of why you should prioritize process over analysis. The second thing you listed up, or that you often mention, is that organizations often mistake an ambition or a goal with a strategy. So going net zero by 2030 or 2040 or 2050, that's not a strategy, that's a goal. What is the difference between a good strategy and having an ambitious goal?
Yeah, so even though you should focus on process over analysis, it's going to be a lot easier to make a good transformation if you have a good sustainability strategy. And when we're talking transformation, it's often also translating that strategy into something that's executionable. We are at the place now where most of the large pharmaceutical and medtech companies, they will have a sustainability strategy. But often it will be flawed or at least have a very large execution gap. So let's talk briefly about what is a good sustainability strategy and what is a bad sustainability strategy. We'll do a full episode on this later as well. A bad sustainability strategy is just having a goal. Planting a flag in, unfortunately, 2050 for most of our clients to be net zero. It's a goal. It's not a strategy because it doesn't tell you how to actually get there and how to prioritize. And even if you ask people, they will never say it's just a goal. There will be a lot of nice wording and buzzwords around it, and it will be packed into some nice PowerPoints. But surprisingly many sustainability strategies, if you scratch enough, are just goals. So what does that mean that they're just goals? It means that they fail to have a clear diagnosis on the situation. What does the playing field look like and what is material? Meaning, do we actually have a CO2 baseline to see where are the majority of our emissions coming from, both current and with the coming growth from our company, which will be hard to remove and which will be easy to remove. Going back to the jet fuel example, for instance, if we have a jet fuel or equivalent, that's going to be super hard, and consuming less should probably be the key strategy there. So at the end of the day, a strategy, a good sustainability strategy, needs to focus the resources where you get the most impact, the most value for your time and effort. Even though, I mean, our clients are multinational companies with tens of billions of dollars in revenue, but they still have limited resources, surprisingly limited resources to do transformations, and perhaps even more important, a limited attention span as well. So a good strategy has to guide your resources towards what it is that matters, and what that matters is, where can we reduce CO2? Where can we reduce material consumption? And where can we provide better treatment with sustainability? And where can we make more money or save more money?
So I feel like you're touching upon something that's really important here, and that is to deploy sustainability as a growth engine. That's really crucial here, because if it's not increasing our revenue or our profits in a company, then it's actually at conflict with the reason for existence of the company, because it's there with a mission, and one of the vehicles that's making that mission sort of achievable is to generate revenue and generate profits for the shareholders or the owners. So if the sustainability strategy fails to deliver on that goal, it might as well just lie around in a drawer somewhere, and it's not going to be that license to operate that will build the future of the company.
That's a great point, and it goes back to the focusing of resources. And another way many sustainability strategies fails is that they end up becoming a laundry list or a checklist of stuff to do. Usually, where yes, we have to do everything, and then when it does that, not only does it become less actionable, because if you have to do everything, then it's like picking a movie on Netflix. I have so many options. What do I do? And you get paralyzed from the paradox of choice. But also, it becomes very hard to communicate throughout the organization. So everyone else in a pharmaceutical or medtech company is super busy already doing something hard that somehow delivers treatment that's efficient and safe, or is a part of that, whether you are in the supply chain or whether you are in production or you are in the commercial units that sell these medicines and services out to people. You are very busy already doing something that's objectively very important for humankind. So having a long laundry list of things to do is not really translatable into the everyday life of these people. So you need to, that's what I really like about the Circular for Zero tagline of the Novo Nordisk sustainability strategy, for instance, that in a very condensed form, it makes it easy to communicate what is the strategy about, initially at least. Then there's a lot of unfolding on what does that actually mean and who does what. But it states not only an ambition that's included in the zero as well, but also actually a means of action with circularity that you can communicate to someone in a 5-minute conversation actually. And that's sort of the attention span that you need to.
And it also has that diagnosis sort of withheld in the tagline, right? Because it's circular, which is the sort of contrary to the linear. Where if it was linear for zero, it would actually be the net zero by 2050 goal, where we continue in the linear economy, we continue doing things the way we did yesterday, whereas the circular actually, it sort of entails a very bold ambition of taking part in a transition on a societal level towards a circular economy. But the third element of why transformations fails that you touched upon earlier is this thing about engaging everyone early and often inside the organization. Can you elaborate a bit on that?
Yeah, that and putting it at the core of the business, which is closely related to the strategy part as well. So if we look at sustainability and how it's been developed in a corporate setting in general, but especially also in pharma and medtech companies, it's been a philanthropic endeavor that was put a bit on top, usually driven by the PR or communications department.
It used to always be marketing folks when we started out and we talked to sustainability departments.
Yeah, but not even the proper marketing folks who are like helping selling products, which would have been great.
Yeah.
But more let's get some news articles and we have one FT a year. I call it the disease of the 90s and the zeros as well. And a very good way of testing if your sustainability strategy and your transformation plan is on the right path is to ask these simple questions. Does our sustainability strategy or sustainability transformation help provide better treatment for patients? Do we make more money from it? Or do we save more money from it? And if you cannot answer yes to ideally all of those three, then you're doing something wrong. Because then it's going to fizzle out. I said there's limited resources in these companies, that's true, but there's also still a lot of resources. So, you can have a small team that does a report every year, but it's going to be artificially upheld unless you get into the core logic and the core services of your company. However, if you do that, if you can answer the question, hey, we are providing better treatment or more secure treatment or saving money doing sustainability, then you get a very fast-moving flywheel in a corporate setting, because resources just naturally flow towards these things. If you can demonstrate that, hey, we get a more secure supply chain if we do circular economy like this, and we collect rainwater for our pharma factories or something like that, then that starts to escalate relatively fast.
It's kind of like telling the CFO that there's actually an economical reason to do this. There's risk mitigation. There's a way to build more resilience for us, and sort of making this sustainability strategy positioned as a way of future-proofing your business. That you're essentially saying that by doing A, B, and C, we'll be able to mitigate the risks of this and this and that. And in that way, you're essentially putting a price and a cost and a potential return of investment as well on the strategy. And that's an area we often see companies failing at. But another element is also to, and you're kind of touching upon that with the laundry list, but is to make sure that the personnel on the floor, all of them having objectively very important high priority tasks, they need to be able to see themselves in that strategy as well. And that's why when we're working with sustainability strategy, we always make it a very high priority to talk to the people on the floor, ask them, what is it that's important to you? What do you see as the key elements? And then also make that part of the diagnosis, because if the people in the organization do not see this transformation as important, then you can have the
nicest
best
PowerPoint
intentions,
show,
the best PowerPoint shows. You can even have a summer party where you pitch it, or you can talk about it at the General Assembly or whichever forums are there. If the people inside the organization are not mobilized and engaged and listened to, that transformation is going to fail.
And they need to be able to answer the question, how does this make my work and my priorities easier, better? If I'm an account executive selling medtech products to hospitals or care systems, how do I sell more? If I'm a production manager and I'm responsible for a line, then how do I have less failures? How do I have more consistency production? If I'm doing clinical trials, how do I have lower dropout rates? Can I get the same results with fewer clinical trials? If each individual cannot answer, how does this help me? It's not going to work. And I think that's also when we are engaged by our clients. Thankfully, I think we are always so far been able to develop a really trustworthy relationship where they also listen to us. But one of the things I've noticed is that we will often ask to do more interviews, more organizational engagement than they're actually asking for. And we have to push that through a little bit, because there's always this operation focus. And the easy thing as a consultant to do would be to say, great, then I can just focus on my analysis over here, and I don't have to do interviews with different time zones and get all this awkward data in that's qualitative and a bit weird moldly, that I can just get some data extractions from your SAP or ERP, and we will have a very nice result with 2 lines under that.
But if we can even get it fit it into an Excel sheet, that would be really
exactly
neat.
And of course we do that work too, but it's we can just see that the difference and the impact that we get to create out there ends up being much higher when clients trust us to engage more with their organizations in these transformations. So that's always a priority for us. So to wrap it up, when you're doing a sustainability transformation, and you should, you need to focus on process over analysis. Engage the people early, engage them often, even if it's not perfect. Just saying that, hey, we started doing this work with sustainability. We don't have all the answers, but we're trying to find them. Having a good strategy that's not just a goal or a laundry list, but that has a clear diagnosis of the problem and focuses resources on where you get the most impact, reducing CO2 or material use, or create the best treatment or business value. And then last, put it in the core of the business. You have to be able to answer, how do I make better treatment for the patients? Or how do I make or save money from this? And thankfully, it's doable. I think every single week I see a new great business case out there with circular economy or higher win rates of tenders and all these things.
Yeah, there's a lot of great reasons to engage. And luckily, we see more and more organizations engage, and we see a very rapidly rising demand for both sustainable services and sustainable products. And we also see a rising awareness from the patient side. So that's
a whole different story. It's also just, I mean, it's expected from your patients, from your employees, from your partners.
Thanks for enlightening us, Joachim, and sharing your views and insights here.
This is one of the best parts of my job. I love it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast where I was interviewing Joachim on why transformation fails, or why sustainability transformation fails. I hope that you learned a lot from it. I always learn a lot from these conversations with Joachim. I find him to be very insightful and great at analysis in particular, and his business understanding, I hope to you as well, also really shines through when we have these conversations. So it's, even though I have them every day during my work, I always find it to be very informative and educational. Part of the Sustainable Healthcare podcast is driven by the demand from you, dear listeners. So if you would be so kind to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen, rate it. If you listen on a podcast where you are allowed to like or subscribe, share your feedback with us. We are very active on LinkedIn, so if you want to engage with us in the discussions or suggest topics for us to discuss, or guests to have on the show, we're really interested in hearing your thoughts. So if you will please like, subscribe, give us feedback, tell us what you think. We're always very, very curious to get your feedback. So thanks a lot for listening and spending your time on being with us here on the Sustainable Healthcare podcast.